This one up and down.
Well, all right, that's something we do.
It wasn't really bad.
Yeah, but people thought it was like what's going to happen. Maybe that's, I don't know what was going on, or whether I remember this when I was well, I didn't know there was a classmate that came out with so out. Yeah, but then I realized later on life it was the
Well, hello, friend.
Hello, friend. Doesn't this stand go up and down? I press the pedal and not really does it. But it did.
Not easily. It does, but not easily. It's not like a on the streaming.
Good morning. My name is Ray Wilson. I'm the worship associate this morning. I welcome one and all to our church and our worship service. If you are joining us for the first time, we invite you to stop at the visitors' table in the vestibule after the service. There you can find information to take with you about the First Religious Society and about Unitarian Universalism. We also hope you will pick up copies of our ministers' previous sermons, which can be found on shelves near the front door. You can also find out more about us on our website, frsuu.org, or on Facebook. We encourage you to connect with any of our members or staff, or with our minister, Reverend Rebecca Bryan, so that we can get to know you. Everyone is invited to join us after the service for coffee hour next door in the parish hall. That's the building over there. Those who have name tags are encouraged to wear them, both as a way to strengthen our community and as a welcoming gesture to newcomers. If you don't have a name tag and would like one, please ask at the visitors' table after the service. We encourage everyone's participation in all of our activities and all of our endeavors, and we invite each of you into our shared ministry, which takes place within this church and outside these walls. On that subject, I call your attention to the announcements of meetings, classes, and events listed in the Here's What's Going On section of the Order of Service. Please take a moment to look through these listings. Thank you. It's good to be together.
In particular, this morning, or actually this afternoon, I do hope that those of you who are able join us. We'll be gathering outside on the steps of the church at 12:30 for a silent march to Market Square to honor Transgender Day of Remembrance and hold a vigil in this community. Our call to worship this morning are the words of Richard Gilbert. We meet on holy ground, brought into being as life encounters life, as personal histories merge into the communal story, as we take on the pride and pain of our companions, as separate selves become community. How desperate is our need for one another, our silent beckonings to our neighbors, our invitations to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcome into our own. May our souls capture this treasured time. May our spirits celebrate our meeting in this time and in this space. For we meet on holy ground. You are faithfully called to worship.
invite forward the organizers of our Transgender Day of Remembrance silent vigil, who will light the chalice and the candles of peace. The vigil will take place immediately after the service today.
The words to the chalice lighting are printed in your order of service. Please join with me as we say them together. We gather this hour
as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs.
We light this
Beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Each week, we also light 2 candles of peace, representing 2 places on earth we lift up and remember as a sacred encounter to our world. There are untold number of places on earth that need peace. These 2 we especially hold close in this service and through the week ahead. After each candle is lit, we will speak the words for peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. Peace, salam, shalom. Our first candle is lit for Market Square here in Newburyport, where today we will hold a vigil in honor of Transgender Day of Remembrance, and for Boston and places all over this country that will be holding similar vigils this week. We pray for those families and friends who have lost loved ones who have been killed as a direct result of being transgender. May these families know peace, may people know tolerance, and may all people be safe. Peace.
Salam, shalom.
Our second candle is lit for South America, where many peoples are demonstrating and fighting for sovereignty and self-determination. We honor these indigenous-led movements that resist violent legacies of colonialism and imperialism. We pray for peaceful resolutions that respect the dignity of citizens of these nations and for courage to resist narratives that benefit multinational corporations over human lives. Peace.
Salam, shalom. Thank you. Our opening hymn this morning is entitled, "We Are a Gentle, Angry People." This song, written by Holly Near during the gay rights movements of the 1970s and 1980s, is a call for us to be in community together and to express the fullness of our feelings. We are angry and we are loving. We are happy and we are sad. Holly's song invites us into that wide embrace of all that makes us human. In the last few years, she has been working with expanding this language to be inclusive of our trans family and friends, and we'll work on adding that language ourselves when she has it for us. Won't you please rise and bow to your spirit? Let's join our voices together in our opening hymn, number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. please join together in our affirmation of faith? The words are printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Please be seated. And at this time, I would like to invite forward all of the children and youth who are with us this morning. Come on up here. Come all the way up. Come all the way up. There's plenty of room. Plenty of room. And we're going to come all the way in, make lots of space. Right over here. Come on. And while you're still coming, I'm going to invite a friend of ours up, Elliot Walsh, to come join me. You got to make space here. There's some room. Plenty of space. Come on up. Yeah. Come on, closer. Come on. I'm actually pretty nice. It's okay. If you come here, there's space. Yeah. It's so good to see everybody. Hi, Elliot.
Hello.
Good to see you. We're going to put this, okay. So, hi, everyone. It is great to see you. So, some of you may have been here last year or not when we first met Elliot. And Elliot has come back again today, and he's going to share with us in just a moment. But I just wanted to share some words that actually Julie wrote last year that were so well done that I'm just going to use them exactly as she wrote them. And it's about explaining what transgender means. So, how many of you know or have known a baby? Probably all of us, right? And so what is the first question that people often ask when a baby is born? Is it a boy or a girl? That's good. Last year someone said, is it alive? That's true. So once we know, is it a boy or is it a girl? Now for a lot of people that works just great, right? But for a lot of other people it doesn't work out great. Because people, doctors and parents and soon everyone else is calling this person one thing. But they know deep in their heart they are something else. So someone who's called a boy might really know that she's a girl. And someone who's called a girl might really know that he's a boy. And some people feel like something in between, or not either, neither one. So it isn't necessarily the question we want to ask. I might say what we want to say when we see a baby is simply welcome to this world. Now, Elliot, you have some things to share with us, and I'm going to help you. Can he scoot in right here? Let's see. There we go.
Okay. Hello. Is this thing on?
Is it on?
Is it on? Yes? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Elliot, and I spoke here once before in April, and I was speaking about my transition as a transgender man and how everybody can and should be accepting and respectful to everybody, even if you don't necessarily understand that person yourself. They're still deserving of your respect. And I think that aligns with today's service about how we should welcome the stranger, because we should welcome and respect everybody, even those who think or act or live life differently or a way that we would consider strange, in a way that we don't understand. Because just because somebody is a stranger to you or that person's life is strange to you doesn't mean that it's actually strange. It's just to you. It means that you don't understand them yet. And I'm sure many people here hadn't spoken to a trans person that they knew of or had heard a trans person's story until I spoke or you heard about it today maybe. And I thank you all for listening to that. You listened and gave me the respect that I deserved, despite my being a stranger to most of you. And you can't really come to understand somebody else or befriend someone else or come to know them as more than a stranger unless you give them that respect and you welcome them with openness. Because what stranger would feel welcome opening up to you if they're greeted with an audience that isn't actively listening or is actively treating them like an other or like a stranger? Transgender Remembrance Day is coming up this week, and it serves to remind us all of the many trans people who have been lost to the world. There have been 22 lives lost in the US this year alone, with many more lost around the world. 22 of my trans siblings who were lost because of transphobia, which is often rooted in a lack of respect and understanding for how trans people live and experience the world and our lives. That's why it's so important for us to remain open and listen to others, share our stories, because it's truly life or death for many of us. And to be honest, I was really nervous about speaking in April and today, but I know that I am sharing my whole life, my world, my thoughts, with a group of what was once strangers. But I have a duty and a privilege as a trans man for those who cannot speak safely and for those who have died living authentically to share my story to hopefully gain some respect for my community. And because I've embraced you all as strangers, we are no longer strangers today. We are friends and people joined by the desire to listen, understand, and make a few more people friends instead of strangers. Thank you.
Hey everyone, you've been great participants, and now we're going to sing you to Young Church.
This month, half of our loose plate collection will go to support a special holiday celebration. The Amesbury Holiday Program, Christmas Tree Santa, and Our Neighbor's Table are collaborating to help Amesbury families that need a little holiday support. Christmas Tree Santa supplies families a real tree. Then about 150 guests gather for a holiday dinner. Santa swings by with gifts for the kids and grocery gift cards for the families. This is a heartfelt celebration of holiday spirit and caring for all. Thank you for supporting this important celebration. As an act of worship, the offering will now be received.
Now is the time in our service each week where we pause to lift up and remember the joys and sorrows of those among us. This morning we hold closely in our minds and in our hearts Patricia Montez, who was here and spoke a few weeks ago. Soon thereafter, her nephew was deported to Honduras. And we hold her and her family in our minds and in our hearts. We also hold in our hearts this morning Nancy Colby. Nancy's former husband, Jim Leonard, passed away on Thursday evening. And Julie Parker Amory and her family, Steve, Liam, and Lily, as Julie's father died last week. We have two memorial services to share information about. Kathy Sadel's memorial service will be held November 23rd, Saturday at 10:30 a.m. And then Bill Pasquina's memorial service will be held November 30th, Saturday at 1 p.m. And for all of those joys and sorrows that, though unspoken, are just as important and held just as dear, we open our hearts this day. And of course, we lift up all of those families and friends and trans people who have lost their lives. And to that end, I offer this prayer, written by Rabbi Reuben Zellman, entitled Twilight People's Prayer. As the sun sinks and the colors of the day turn, each day we offer a blessing for the twilight. For twilight is neither day nor night, but in between. We are all twilight people. We can never be fully labeled or defined. We are many identities and loves, many genders and none. We are in between roles at the intersection of histories or in between place and place. We are crisscrossed paths of memory and destination, streaks of light swirled together. We are neither day nor night. We are both, neither and all. May the sacred in-between of all evenings suspend our certainties, soften our judgments, and widen our vision. May this in-between light illuminate our way to the spirit of love who transcends all categories and definitions. May the in-between people who have come to pray be lifted up into this twilight and love. We cannot always define. We can always say a blessing. Amen, and blessed be.
Today's reading by the English writer David White is entitled Ground. Ground is what lies beneath our feet. It is the place where we already stand, a state of recognition, the place or the circumstances to which we belong, whether we wish to or not. It is what holds and supports us, but also what we do not want to be true. It is what challenges us, physically or psychologically, irrespective of our hoped-for needs. It is the living, underlying foundation that tells us what we are, where we are, what season we are in, and what, no matter what we wish in the abstract, is about to happen in our body, in the world, or in the conversation between the two. To come to ground is to find home in circumstances and in the very physical body we inhabit in the midst of those circumstances. And above all, to face the truth, no matter how difficult that truth may be. To come to ground is to begin the courageous conversation, to step into difficulty, and by taking that first step, begin the movement through all the difficulties to find the support and foundation that has been beneath our feet all along, a place to step onto, a place on which to stand, and a place from which to step. Please rise in body or spirit and join your voices in hymn number 1013 in the Teal hymnal, Open My Heart.
Who is your Moabite? Or I could ask, who is the person or group of people toward whom you feel distrust, dislike, perhaps even disdain? I'm serious. Who is the person, or better yet, group of people who you find distasteful? The people you would rather not spend your time with or get to know? Who you would not invite over for dinner? If you find yourself thinking, no one, I urge you to reconsider. We all have people and groups of people we say we don't like. We don't like. We fear. We don't understand. We would not be human otherwise. The point here is not to get you to confess. It's certainly not to get you to feel bad or to assign blame. It is to invite us all to become aware of these notions that we hold and to ask ourselves if we are willing to reconsider them. It is a personal question. Today's sermon, Lost in Non-Translation, is based on Isaac Asimov's essay of the same title, Lost in Non-Translation. I was introduced to this essay and to the music that we just heard so beautifully, thank you, choir, in this anthem by Ray Wilson. Ray came to me last year and asked if I would be willing to do this sermon, if we could have this music performed, and if I would preach on this essay. It had affected him deeply when he had first read it years ago, and he wanted to know my take on it. I agreed, as I like a good challenge, and I will say I most especially like preaching on what interests my parishioners. And yes, that is an open invitation. It is. The essay reflects Asimov's understanding of the book of Ruth. And I will, in a few minutes, tell the tale of the book of Ruth. So if you are one who is not aware of that, I will share that in a moment. The essay reflects his understanding of this book of Ruth as a call to stop vilifying the stranger. He describes the book of Ruth as a tale of tolerance for the despised, of love for the hated, of the reward that comes of brotherhood. And he goes on to say that this story demonstrates that by mixing the genes of humankind and by forming what he calls a hybrid, great people will come. I should say that Asimov also reminds us that there is one word in the book of Ruth that didn't get translated when the Bible became written in Greek, and that is Moabite. And what the word means is stranger. Particularly, it means the despised stranger or the hated. This essay, written in 1973, calls us to apply the biblical call for philonexia, which is the Greek word for care of the stranger. Asimov names in his analysis race relations as the primary source of hatred between people in America. He claimed, if left unchecked, it would lead to a white-black civil war. 46 years later, his essay was written in 1973, 46 years later, the hatred between groups of people, of which he writes, has not abated. It continues between races and extends to other groups. For example, as Elliot shared this morning, 26 transgender people or gender nonconforming people were killed in 2018 in America. 22 have been killed this year. And what's even most important to understand is that those numbers are only the numbers that actually get reported, that the deaths are because of somebody's gender. It also does not take into account suicides. Most recently, we mourned the death of Evelyn West. Evelyn was trans, and a member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Reading, Massachusetts. She took her own life. She was also a youth counselor at Star Island, where Sophia Lyons is the minister. And when Sophia and I spoke of it, we talked about the fact that Evelyn had been struggling. Evelyn was clearly in pain and depressed and struggling. It was not one of those things where people could look at each other and say, we had no idea. Where in the world did this come from? I think of her family today and all those young people, Unitarian Universalist people, many of whom identify as trans, and what they're feeling today. Or what about, again, thinking about this concept of groups hating groups? What about the 825,000 plus DACA recipients whose safety is under debate? Or how about the fact that blacks are incarcerated at nearly 6 times the imprisonment rate for whites? I could go on and on and on, but need I? Distrust, disdain, and yes, hate for groups of people is a real and present reality. It is pervasive, subtle, and very complex. Depending upon who you are, it can be aimed at transgender, immigrants, people with less education than you, people who are older than you, differently abled than you. And again, the list is endless. It happens whenever we perceive someone or a group of people as the stranger. And I call it otherizing. We make the people into the other. I went on this dual trip in seminary to Israel and Palestine, and I first experienced firsthand what this was like because I identified with a particular story. And I kept waiting for somebody to validate that story. And when they didn't, I kept hoping that I would change, right? That I would feel differently. And what I had to finally understand is that I was otherizing. I knew what was right, and I was waiting for everyone else to come to my side and affirm that what I knew was right. We all otherize. The book of Ruth, I told you I would tell you what the story is. The book of Ruth is the shortest book in the Bible, and yet its message is far-reaching, exemplifying the Jewish and Christian message to care for the stranger. Many other religions and philosophies advocate for caring for the stranger. For this sermon, I'm focusing on this particular text. Here's the story. The story is told in a way that indicates that it takes place in the late 2nd millennium BCE. Of course, it was written centuries later in the middle of the 1st millennium BCE. But again, taking place late 2nd millennium BCE. It's interesting that in the Bibles, its location varies. In the Hebrew Bible, it is part of the writings, or the 3rd division, whereas it comes earlier in the Christian Bibles between Judges and Samuel. It takes place on the eastern side of the Dead Sea in a land that was known then as Bethlehem. Bring yourself, if you can, into this story. Today, that land is a Palestinian city in Israel's West Bank. So there is Bethlehem, and then there is Moab, which is now known as Jordan. These two lands and the people within them were not able to interact with each other, right? The people in Bethlehem had ostracized or otherized the people in Moab, and the people in Moab were not welcome or safe. They were the despised strangers. And so the story begins with this family who lives in Bethlehem. The father and his wife Naomi have 2 sons. And at the start of the story, the family moves from Bethlehem to Moab, a land and a people, again, that were being excluded. As soon as they move, the father dies, and the sons marry 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. I want you to think, particularly back 50, 60, 100 years ago, think of 2 white men marrying 2 black women 100 years ago. So, these white men marry these black women, and then 10 years later, the sons die, and now we have this mother, Naomi, and these 2 daughter-in-laws, and they are destitute because at this time, women were owned and possessions of men. So when they were not married, they were completely reliant upon the charity of those around them to care for them. So after the death of her sons, Naomi realizes that if she is to survive, she has to return to her homeland of Bethlehem, where she will receive charity. She implores her 2 daughter-in-laws to stay in Moab, stay where they are safe. She's saying to these 2 black women, stay where you will not be killed. Don't you know the laws and the rules? You can't enter this land. One of them agrees and stays, but Ruth refuses to stay. And she proclaims that she will follow her mother-in-law wherever she goes for as long as she lives. Her words that we just heard in song, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So although Ruth is literally putting her life on the line, she and her mother-in-law Naomi return to Bethlehem. To shorten up a story, they come and meet up with a gentleman named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's deceased husband. Again, the short story is Boaz and Ruth fall in love, and they marry. A white man in power marrying this Moabite woman, black woman. Illegal, unsafe, breaks all the rules. And they have a son, Obed. Ruth, the ever-kind woman she is, allows Naomi to become Obed's wet nurse and become known as his mother. Here's the thing. Obed becomes the father of Jesse, who is the father of King David, a biblical hero second only to Moses. Well, what do you know? Right? This man of power marries this woman that is illegal, and they bear the king. Now, we can take this on the surface level as a very sweet love story with a happy ending, right? Ruth, a woman of faith, loyalty, goodness, the epitome of what a woman should be. No. We can also, like Asimov and other scholars, look deeper into its message. Here is a story of a woman who stands up against cultural mores, political practices, and laws of exclusion. She remains true to her values and to her commitments to her family. Its message is clear. When you stand up against the norms and the laws that otherize people, kings can be born. She rebukes the customs that otherized her. Here's the thing. She could never have done that alone. She could not have done that by herself. She needed allies. She needed people that were in societal places of power to join with her. In her case, Boaz. She was not a goody two-shoes. She was brilliant, subversive, and powerful. She acted subversively to create good and right order. She resisted exclusionary practices and refused to live in a world of other. Again, white man, black woman, forbidden to commingle, marry, bear a son who becomes a hero. Yarozakovich, a biblical scholar, says this: the stance of Ruth is clear and unambiguous. Hased, kindness, and loyalty are more important than ethnicity. Hased is a Hebrew word meaning deep and long-lasting love between people and between God and people. Adrienne Marie Brown writes about the need to stop otherizing and to develop from strangers into friends in her book, Emergent Strategy. And she says this about otherizing: this can't be the purpose of our species, to constantly define each other as other, to build walls between us and engage in formal and informal war against each other. How, she asks, do we turn our collective, full-bodied intelligence toward collaboration, knowing that that is how we will survive? And going back a little bit, so we can trace this from ancient times to present days and in between, Soren Kierkegaard said, at the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. And the antidote to indifference is relationship, from which we come to know one another and grow to care for and sometimes even love one another. And at this point, I would like to invite forward Justin Murphy-Mancini, our Director of Church Music, who has a personal story to share with us.
Good morning. Right now, I hear a lot of people talk about our society being polarized, that the divisions between groups of people based on their beliefs or identities have never been sharper. I have been thinking about this conventional wisdom declared by politicians, media personalities, and best-selling authors, and I have been thinking that perhaps it is obscuring something important. It seems to me that there is a kind of polarization at work in our society, not operating, though, at the level of Democrat versus Republican. Rather, it is the formation at all levels of our discourse of an opposition between people whose humanity is recognized fully and people whose humanity is at best conditional, if not denied outright. I am inspired to journey with this unfolding truth by building relationships with those people that our wider U.S. culture would deny the status of fully human, primarily because in building relationships with them, I recognize deeply the fullness of their worth and dignity. I think of myself as deeply blessed to have met and become friends with several people from across the South American continent, many of whom currently live in the US. I connected with them originally because we shared creative spaces and goals, which aided in building mutual understanding and common ground. Sometimes this wasn't easy. We didn't always agree about the art we were making or interpreting. That being said, it was our willingness to see what we shared that made our points of connection and divergence into a rich fabric of relationship. From these beginnings, we began to connect in more ways, building trust and understanding until we were able to be vulnerable with each other. And it was always at this point that all of them have said in one way or another, "You do know what the U.S. has done to impact the place where I grew up and where my family has lived, don't you?" Sometimes I did, and sometimes these provocative discussions led me to educate myself. And I want to tell you a few truths that I have learned. The United States has supported the overthrow of democratically elected governments in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And now we can add Bolivia to that list, although news outlets are bending over backward to avoid calling the current military takeover a coup d'etat. Sometimes it's hard to hear that the government my parents taught me I should participate in is responsible for explicitly undemocratic actions in other places. Because in all of those countries, a small group of people, usually the military, and almost always with the support of the CIA, overthrew the government and instituted decades of violent, anti-democratic rule. The reason I believe these things represents a journey that is grounded in UU principles, because I work to honor people's inherent worth and dignity no matter who they are. I believe that people should not suffer. And when people who were directly affected by US anti-democratic action tell me about their experience, I believe them. I take that belief and I seek to understand the context and the history that I didn't know before. Most importantly, I resist sources, even if it's the New York Times, if necessary, when they do not acknowledge the suffering I know takes place. I especially resist relying on conventional news outlets when they support the overthrow of governments, no matter how problematic. Instead, I am choosing to seek a broader context. Here is a context that I am using now. It is a direct contradiction of our second and fifth principles, those of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the use of the democratic process in our congregations and society at large to accept any narrative that justifies violence against self-determination. In Bolivia right now, an ultra-extremist Christian who has called indigenous religions satanic, who enjoys no national elected authority, whose political party received 4.2% of the vote in the last election, and who has preemptively granted amnesty to any atrocities committed by the military, has claimed the presidency of that country. Even if you do not feel that the government that preceded it was good or just, this alternative is not just or democratic or compassionate for the 2/3 of Bolivia's population who are indigenous. So I return to my first point. What is the real polarization in our world? Democrats and Republicans alike support the coup d'etat in Bolivia. Both Marco Rubio and Bob Menendez have been caught on tape discussing the military overthrow of Evo Morales. Democratic and Republican administrations alike supported the coups in that long list of countries I mentioned earlier. Why does our government do this? I think that there are many answers, not all of which I can say now, and I certainly don't know all of them. But I cannot escape the fact that we as Americans assent to the mistreatment of millions on behalf of cheap fruit, coffee, and other natural resources for ourselves. We have decided that all of these people do not have a right to self-determination, to articulate a life of dignity for themselves and their families, and I have to admit that's not very UU. So I will continue to articulate forcefully that our principles call us into a different relationship with our neighbors, whether they live on Market Street or in Quito, Caracas, Santiago, or La Paz. Thank you.
So I ask us all, again, myself included, who is your Moabite? Who is the person or group of people you distrust, disdain, or distance yourself from? As Asimov says at the conclusion of his essay, who is the neighbor whom you must love as though they are yourself if you are to be saved. And I close with the words of Rumi, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Amen. Let's rise together, embody our spirit, and in our closing hymn, number 346, come sing a song with me. Let's join our voices together in our unison benediction. The words are printed in your order of service. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. My friends, sometimes we believe and we think it is easier to stay isolated, to stay not thinking about the hard truth. And yet here is what we have come to understand and know. It is only when we walk into that which is the truth, hard, that so too we walk into the answer. We walk into the beauty of knowing truth. There is a liberation in truth that cannot be found when we are separate. Here, my friends, the truth is held, the truth is sought, the truth is ever unveiling itself. Here, there is room for it all.
for we are a gentle and angry people. Go in peace, my friends, and return again in great joy. Amen, and blessed be.
Big anniversary or something like 10 years ago.
Well, they just
Really?
celebrated.
That's a long time ago.
That